Okay, hey, Higher Life Publishing and Marketing. I am so excited to introduce you to Vince Latour, who is the author of The Bible Can Be Proven. As a young boy, author Vincent Latour always had an inquisitive nature. He immediately wanted answers to questions such as, is there a God? I mean, everybody, asked that question, right? How did I get here? How was the world and universe created? His search for answers to these questions led him to a personal encounter with Christ at age 9 or 10. And as his faith grew, his desire to analytically research and validate the word of God intensified. So Latour spent many hours in libraries and bookstores sifting through more than 200 books and hundreds of articles on science, Bible textual criticism, and theology. As he researched these, the author began to see the powerful scientific evidence for creation, as well as the evidence for the historical reliability of the Bible. In his latest book, The Bible Can Be Proven, Vince Latour shares the results of his research to strengthen believers and inform honest seekers. And so I am so glad that you're with us, Vince.
Thank you.
Can you go ahead and just tell us about yourself and tell us, why did you write this book?
Well, by day, I'm an accountant. I'm a CPA and I work for a government agency. So I'm actually not a professional writer, but I've always had a passion for studying and learning and in any kind of research, especially with science and theology. And so as I was studying, I realized all this time I've read over 200, maybe 250 books on the subject of defending the Bible. And I thought, the Bible is such an amazing book. There's promises in that book that the world doesn't give. There's just so many wonderful things in there to put your faith in. And yet, in this society today, the Bible's under a lot of attack. And I've been hearing this for decades. People are saying, well, it wasn't copied accurately. How do we know we have the copies that we have today? The copies, how do we know the copies today are match the copies that when they were first written? How do we know the history in it is true? How do we know the history really happened? Many times you see a program on television that'll say, well, the Bible history didn't really happen. It's these characters were made up. Sometimes you'll see an article in a magazine saying, well, the Bible's full of contradictions, or they'll say things. I think what really motivated me to start off with uh, was hearing again and again the same story where people would say, my son and daughter grew up in a Christian home, went to
Mhm.
Sunday school, went to church with us, and they went off to college. And a religion professor got a hold of them, and they were in his or her class, and the religion professor attacked the Bible. And then they would come home and tell their parents, Mom, Dad, I've become an atheist because the religion professor told me I can't trust the Bible. And I heard this again and again and again. And then I see these programs and these articles that only show one side of the story. They don't even touch on all the research that I've done. For example, the Bible criticism, when they talk about the first five books of the Old Testament being written way, way after the time that they supposedly illustrate, called the documentary hypothesis. That whole hypothesis is still taught in seminaries, yet it's been thoroughly refuted by archaeology. But you don't hear that. You don't. And so I decided, okay, it's time for me to throw my hat into the ring. I can't. I've got to do something about it. The Lord motivated me to not just listen to these accounts anymore. I want to do something about it. I want to give somebody a reference that they can use. And
So
so what
how is your book different from other books on
well,
apologetics?
well, what I tried to do, there's so many books out there on apologetics and some really big, thick things that
Right.
that people don't necessarily want to wade through. For example, there was a book on the evidence for the resurrection that I read that was 800 pages. A book on archaeology, 1,000 pages. I thought, wouldn't it be great? You know, all these different lines of evidence exist. I thought, wouldn't it be great if you could pull it all together into one book, do the heavy lifting for people, go through these big, heavy books that maybe only a research nerd would like to read, and pull out the nuggets and the essential facts and put them in one book and make it an easy to read question and answer type format, and something that you could pull out and use as a reference. And what people have told me is that this is very different from other apologetic books, and that it's easy to follow but yet not watered down.
That's what I noticed about it too when I was reading it. That it's
Good,
like
good.
very, very, very easy to read. Because I have some books on my shelf right now that are apologetics books that I have not opened because they just look so intimidating.
They're intimidating.
Right?
Yeah. Not to mention they're heavy to carry.
Right.
And they're not written in the best of. I mean, most of the apologetic books, when you get into the real meaty ones that have the best facts, or the best scholars, they're written like a doctoral dissertation.
Right.
And there's no paragraphing, there's no headings, everything's in one big mass of text, and you look at it and you go cross-eyed after you get. I don't. I mean, most people would. I happen to love that stuff, which is maybe that's why I decided to get into this. I said, hey, you love to do this research. Not many other people do. Get involved. Respond to these attacks. Give something that that people, young and old, not just college students, but any Christian or any seeker can get a hold of, and to counteract the very slanted presentation you get against the Bible in so many articles, TV programs, and other and professors at universities.
So what do you hope readers take away from your book?
Confidence in their faith, confidence that they can trust those wonderful promises in the Bible, because this is a trustworthy book. You can demonstrate that it's been copied accurately. You can demonstrate that the history in it really happened. And you can also demonstrate this. And this is one thing I found sometimes lacking in other apologetic books. You can demonstrate it's the supernaturally inspired Word of God. It's more than just a reliable book. It's more than just a book that's been copied accurately. It's a book that's been, it's got the fingerprint of God on it, from an author that's from outside the time domain, outside of time and space, putting his signature on it. And he says so in the Word. He says that I before things happen, I declare you to them. I declare them to you. Excuse me. And that's, he stakes. He says, if you let your false gods, and I think it's Isaiah, let your false gods predict the future. Show them, let your idols lay it out 100% accurately. And so I talk about that. And so, yeah, I emphasize that. And what I also did with this book was I thought that some of the other books really didn't go far enough in answering some of the skeptics' objections. So
Okay.
I went on the skeptics' websites. I've read the skeptics' best books. I said, give me your, basically went on them and said, give me your best. I want to hear your best books that criticize the Bible. And I found them, bought them, read them, analyzed them, dissected them, and incorporated responses to them in my book. So I tried to find I tried to read all the different perspectives to get an idea of what is it exactly is out there and what's the reasoning behind it. And I found some other books maybe didn't go far enough with that. And so I think that not only is it easy to read, but it answers a lot of the objections that they might hear.
Well, and it's interesting when you say that you are an accountant and you're not a writer. So why all the effort, and talk and tell us a little bit about your process of writing a book and not being a writer. And you had mentioned someone's name that Hope Flinchbaugh, who was
Yeah.
very instrumental in
Mhm.
helping you.
Mhm.
Tell us, how did you get started with writing your book?
Well, I love math. I love detail. If you read my book, you'll see that. Uh, there's a lot of mathematics in the Bible, and I took to that. I think a detail-oriented way of operating is what really led me to do the research I do. I want to make sure it's on spot accurate, especially talking about things like prophecy, archaeology, and history. So I started writing. I said I want to write an article that brings all these lines of evidence together. So I start writing and start writing and starts. It gets bigger and bigger. Okay, it's a paper. And I called it a paper. It kept growing and growing and growing. Finally, I had to admit, this is a book. This is not a paper. This is
How
not an
many pages
article.
had you written so far?
That was, well, I had a lot of scribble and a lot of notebooks. I think it was at 80,000 words at that point. Uh,
Okay.
and I was wondering how I was going to fit it into a book. And so, just about the time I got done with the manuscript, that took years because I was working full time and writing on nights and weekends. And often I would go to a park or someplace and carry a stack of books with me and read and sit on a bench and write until I couldn't write anymore. And then I'd take a long hike for 2 or 3 miles, and then I'd come back to the bench and sit down and start writing again. And then finally typing it out and getting it into a format that I could put together. And so I had a manuscript. And then I said, okay, now what do I do? What do I do with that? I've heard that you can send a manuscript to someplace and it'll just sit on a shelf and nobody will look at it. And just as I was thinking that, first I also had a few friends look at it who were very sharp-eyed and helped me edit it. And I did my own edit. And then I said, okay, what do I do? Well, all of a sudden I get a card in the mail from the Philadelphia Writers Conference, Christian Writers Conference. I hadn't sent for it. It wasn't something that a long time ago, before I was in a writers group, uh, that I actually even did a talk for them on science and the Bible. This was like 15 years before.
So it's
And
like a
she thought,
sign from God.
yeah, and it was like he dropped it out of the sky. I mean, it was like this. I had never gotten any mail relating to this before for 15 years, and then all of a sudden I got this card that talked about the Philadelphia Writers Conference. So I think I should go to that. And at this conference, you had the opportunity to meet with authors for 15 minutes to talk about what you were writing and that you wanted to write a book or whatever you were writing, fiction, nonfiction, whatever. And so I went there, and you also had an opportunity to have certain authors critique your book. You paid them, and they would critique your book. And so I signed up for as many of those as I could. And so when I went to the conference, there was also classes you could take on how to write, how to market your book. And at that point, I didn't have a book. So I had different reactions from different people. Some said, well, it's just there's so many apologetic books out there. What makes you think they want to buy another one? They said, well, this isn't going to sell. People aren't interested in that anymore. There's a few that said that. Then some that I think when I had the first manuscript, it looked like a doctoral dissertation. And I remember one very well-known author telling me, you got to make it more readable. Make it like one of those guides that they have where they have nice big headings and short paragraphs, and make it more readable. So I went and I redid it. The same material, and I rewrote it in a much better format. And I put it in a question and answer format. And then they liked it. And then I ran into, this was one of my interviews. I was interviewing with Hope Flinchbaugh, and she, more than anybody else, took a big interest in the book. And she, of course, worked for Higher Life at the time. And so at that point, she got some editing going for it. She found someone to edit it, and we got some endorsements because I didn't have that many connections myself. So it was all, the Lord worked all that to my advantage. And I started out with Higher Life, talked to Dave Welday quite a bit about marketing. And I decided to really step out on a limb and print 3,000 books. That was a big step of faith because I had never sold a book before and I didn't know how it was going to go. And so I printed 3,000 books, and then they amazingly managed to fit that whole manuscript into a 200-page book. I think it's
Wow.
220, 80,000. And the print is not microscopic. You can read it very well.
Mhm.
So that's where it took off from there. And then then I started marketing the book myself. They did Higher Life marketed it to Amazon, got me set up there. They also helped me build a website, thebiblecanbeproven.com, which is still it's still going today. I've got over 80 or 90 articles on there, and some that cover material that's in the book, and some new material that's not in the book. So I've kept on writing after I finished the book, and have gone into some other areas.
That's wonderful.
I just did an article on DNA and on the design in DNA, which I think should be required reading for any atheist, because I don't think we look at the design in DNA and you just can't exclude an intelligent designer. It's impossible. It's not
Right,
only
right.
probable, it's scientifically impossible for it to be by chance or by anything that doesn't involve an intelligent designer, not only intelligent designer, but one vastly more intelligent than any human being. But that's a sidelight. But that's really how I got into it. And I'm continuing to write today. And I'd like to eventually do another book, maybe pull some of the articles that I have on there together. But really, Higher Life got me going on this, and their arrangement was also very good because I retained the rights to the book.
Okay.
And they're what they call the co-publishing arrangement. I retained the rights to the book, and yet it wasn't like and they still did all the work for me. They did the typesetting, they did the cover design, all of which I would have had to hire out and do myself. And they did a wonderful job. So I had to be willing to put up a little money to start with. And when I guess it's kind of like self-publishing. You do that. And thank you to the Lord, I had the money to do it at the time. So I was in my 50s. Late 50s when I wrote it. So I say to anybody who's thinking about writing a book, if you're not young, don't let that stop you, because if you've got a message and you want, as I say, throw your hat in the ring, get out there and do it. It's amazing. I mean, I never thought I'd be able to put a book out there. It's a dream come true.
That's wonderful.
All the books I've read, and now I've got one that I put out there myself.
That's wonderful. So, has writing a book changed your life in any way? Has it opened up any speaking opportunities?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's been a tool for evangelism like I never thought I would have. I mean, my whole office bought practically all bought books. Maybe the first month it was out.
Wow.
And it's got a gospel presentation in the back. The last part of the book, the last chapter, ties all the lines of evidence together in an untiable knot. It's just, the foundation is amazing. And then I follow that up with a gospel presentation. So I like to think of it as a giant gospel tract. Everybody people bought it that I knew, people that I know would it opened doors for me to share the gospel with people that maybe I would never have been able to do otherwise. I know people bought it and gave it to their atheist friends. I had opportunities to speak at several, I think 5 times at secular universities where there was a mixed audience.
Really?
I remember one in particular where I went to a friend of mine was in a Christian veterinarian group at Cornell University. And they were looking for speakers, and she suggested, oh, I know, we can invite Vince as a speaker.
So you spoke at Cornell.
at Cornell at their veterinarian school, and what happened was they advertised it campus wide because they were required to do that. And so I had a full classroom, full room, big room of people, mostly non-believers.
Wow.
The group was that hosted it was a small group, but a lot of people came out of curiosity, and so I got a chance to speak for an hour and a half, two 45-minute sections with dinner in between.
That's
and,
wonderful.
and I got to share the gospel. I mean, what an opportunity.
Right.
Yeah, and I've gone all over the state speaking. I've done book signings, which has been wonderful because that's a one-on-one thing. I've done presentations at bookstores, and in fact, I do a PowerPoint talk on each chapter, and I built those up, and so that helped me to learn that and how to do that. In fact, I want to do a Zoom PowerPoint talk at some point coming up. Now that I haven't been able to do anything live, but I've been able to one-on-one talk with so many people and respond finally to that. They come up to me and say, my son and my daughter went to college, and they're about to go off to college, and I don't know how their faith is going to survive. And I'll say, here, take this. This is what they need to read before they go off to college. This might save their faith, or this might bring them back to faith. So many have said, I've got a son or a daughter, or a mother or father or husband or wife who's questioning the Bible. And I always say, when people walk by there, I say, hey, there's good answers to today's challenges to the Bible. There's good answers, and the way I built the book was that way. It was like, it started out, well, first of all, we know we have good copies of the Bible. We show that from the manuscript evidence, unbelievable manuscript evidence. And then, how do we know the history and it really happened? Archaeology shows that. And then how do we know that it's more than the words of men? You've got prophecy of Jesus. You've got prophecy of places and people. You've got an underlying design in the text, types and foreshadowings. You've got scientific foreknowledge in the Bible, quarantine rules that didn't exist in any other part of the world that we could use today. For example,
Right.
you've got a prophecy that pinpoints to within a few days the timing of Jesus's presentation as king on Palm Sunday, and just an amazing amount of things that are there. So yeah, I
So,
mean it's been a life changer and an opportunity opener, I'd say, for me. And I've always wanted to evangelize. I've always tried to be evangelize, but I think talk about jump starting my personal evangelism with people. Writing the book did that.
okay. Yeah, that's what I was going to ask would you say that writing the book changed your life? Which it sounds like it did.
Yeah, I mean, and just the fact that to get it out, to get something that was out, that was in me, that I wanted to get out to people. I'm wondering, how am I going to do it? You don't get that many chances to talk to people.
Right.
But how about a book? And then some people will buy your book just because they're your friend or they know you. How many people bought that book just because they knew me, even though they weren't even probably the least bit interested in apologetics when they started?
Right. But because you're their friend,
Yeah,
they're going to
I
buy the
buy your
book.
book because I want to support you, and then they read it,
Right.
and then whoa, wait a minute, I never heard this stuff before. And most of the time they haven't, because you don't get it from television programs. You don't get usually. You don't get it from articles normally. You surely don't get it from your religion professors at university normally. Once in a while, it depends on where you go, unless you go to a Christian college. But um, so it's a kind of a way of, I won't say getting it in the back door, but and if I just handed out tracts at work, you'd probably get in trouble most places. But it's the same thing. It's a big giant gospel tract. And it's also made for the intellectual skeptic. I've had people read it who are skeptical, and they've changed their minds. So it can work that way too. It's mostly, I think it's for believers. Mostly believers buy it, but not always. I've had believers buy it and give it to their friends or atheists.
So it's the Bible Can Be Proven, and you can buy the book at thebiblecanbeproven.com. Is that where they can buy the book?
You can buy it on Amazon, or you can go to my website and get it at a discount. On PayPal. I got it on my website. I also have a newsletter that I've started in September of 2018. If you go on thebiblecanbeproven.com, there'll be a pop-up and you can sign up for my newsletter. You'll get a free article once a month. Some of the materials in the book, some of it's new. And there's also at certain points, I offer the book, and usually at the same discounted price that I have on my website. There's over 2 years worth of articles on there right now, on all
Okay.
different topics.
And what's your URL?
It is thebiblecanbeproven.com.
Okay.
Pretty
Okay.
easy to remember.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thanks for visiting with us today. And
Thank you,
go to thebiblecanbeproven.com. It's super easy to read. I started reading it, and I mean, I like that Q&A format where it hits on, you know, some of the biggest questions that people have about the Bible, and takes the deep dive, but explains it in layman's terms. So I encourage you to go get that. And thank you for visiting with us.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.